Good morning. We are in the mini-series, although now I think it's going to be about 4 weeks, so I don't know how much of a mini-series that is. But we're in the mini-series called Cyberprayers that I started last week. And what we noticed was that Nehemiah, when we were talking about spiritual gifts, Nehemiah had a remarkable gift for managing people and resources. He had this ability to be not just someone who's a supervisor, but someone who has a supernatural vision for using people to get tasks done. And what the task was that he was encountering was rebuilding the wall in Jerusalem. And he eventually ended up doing this in an incredibly short amount of time. And I believe that this was because, among other spiritual gifts he might have had, he had the spiritual gift of kybernesis. Kybernesis. All right. Kybernesis is a word that means more like navigating, like steering a ship. So someone who is a leader who has this spiritual gift is one who understands the goal we're after, but knows how to steer the ship in order to get there. In case there are obstacles around, you're still going to end up at the right place, but you've got to now navigate. And last week I talked a lot about how your GPSs in your car and in your phone do this same thing. You type in where you want to go, and it starts to make alterations to your journey depending on traffic and things that might delay you. It's saying, here, this is the right way to go. It'll get you there faster, right? Well, someone with this spiritual gift of kybernesis, eventually that word, kybernesis, ended up becoming cybernesis, which looks a lot like cybernetic, right? And so that's why I call this cyber prayers. Yes. Cyber prayers, right? Don't you want to pray some cyber prayers? Dear Lord. You know, it makes you think about a robot, right? But really, it is about navigating life. And it's not just praying anything and everything to God, but it's about praying moment by moment and allowing God to give you turn-by-turn directions for your life. And so what we've learned from Nehemiah, who, by the way, there are just a lot of prayers that he prays in the book of Nehemiah, because originally Nehemiah was like a diary. It's his own journal that was saying, well, here's what we had to do. Here's how I did it. And so some things come across as maybe even a little boring. We won't read a lot of the parts where it said, well, this family was working on this part of the wall and that family. But it was important to him because these were all things that he carried to God into prayer. He didn't just make decisions on his own. He didn't make just the plan on his own. He took every step to God in prayer. And every step of the way, he was praying. And so when we think about someone who might have that spiritual gift, we think of the word cyber, we think of Nehemiah, we think of praying, navigating life through prayer, being responsive to the turn-by-turn leading of God. But just because you pray doesn't mean that your path will be smooth. Just because you fix in your mind, this is where I'm headed, doesn't mean that you won't have to make some changes as opposition comes. The other thing about the book of Nehemiah is this incredible story of opposition, enemies that were coming at Nehemiah. Nehemiah had this goal from God to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. But the people who were already sort of, they weren't the authorities there, but they had become sort of the bullies, the people that were just, getting rich off of the people, didn't like this idea that a wall would be rebuilt around Jerusalem. So when you're praying, it doesn't mean that your pathway is going to be smooth. It doesn't prevent you from encountering opposition. Last week I was talking a lot about praying, and I even used in my own life the acres prayer that I mentioned to you. And yet it has been such a difficult week. And I don't know if it's been difficult for you, but there's been lots of people I know that have had extremely difficult weeks ahead of last week. I just said to myself, it's in the air. It's almost like the more you want to align yourself with God, the more opposition will come after you. So you need to know how to respond when you are spiritually attacked. And that's what it really comes down to. Well, we're going to learn this through Nehemiah's opposition named Sanballat. Do y'all call him Sanballat, right? Well, I heard somebody say Sanballat. So exotic. Sanballat. Yeah, Sanballat. And he doesn't deserve any good stuff. He's an opponent here, so we don't like him. So I don't know. I might call him Sanballat if I'm feeling interesting. But Sanballat and his partners, and what they are showing us is that when the opposition comes, what are you going to do? You got to keep praying. You just got to keep praying. Just keep swimming, right? Just keep praying because you need protection. You have got to, like I mentioned last week, be like a GPS, constantly getting aligned with where's the right way to go, where is the place that I can move around, and how do I recalibrate myself? How do I recalculate my pathway? How do I steer the boat when the opposition comes? Because listen, Satan does not take a day off. If you're trying to live connected to God, you're trying to move in step with Him, you're trying to be spiritually steered by God, attacks are going to keep coming. And prayer doesn't cancel the conflict, but it does help us process the pressure without becoming poisoned by it. If you're like me, you're going through a rough week, I'm at that place where I sense this is some sort of a spiritual battle. And I say, I don't want to handle this wrongly. I want to handle this with faith. But in that moment, I'm angry. I'm angry. And I'm overwhelmed. And all the things that were hitting me from all sides are just wearing me down. And even though I want to do right by God, I'm vulnerable. And I feel exposed. So what we need is a spiritual firewall. Using the cyber language, that's something that we often talk about, is having something that is there in between the attacks and me. A firewall. Because what a firewall does is it will block the malicious messages that sabotage your spirit. And without a firewall, you become so vulnerable. So today's message is firewall, where not every thought that comes into your mind belongs there. Not every message that shows up in your spirit is from God. And you need to know, you loved my acronym last week. You need to know that firewall stands for fire, false information, refuse entry. Come on, you groaned last week. I was expecting a groan. I want it to be silly, but it's true. A firewall is something that is going to tell you, this is what God says. And it's going to stop you from now absorbing the messages that are nothing more than lies from the father of lies. Untruth, half-truths, things that God didn't tell you about yourself or the situation, but somehow you pull it into your own mind and you even start to think those thoughts yourself. You know, medical ads come on the TV so much that it makes you think that you are absolutely sick as can be. Maybe I need some of that. Why are all the ads telling me that I need more hair? Why are all the ads telling me I need more intimacy? Why do all the ads tell me I need more fun in my life? And soon you begin to say that to yourself. You begin to have self-critical thoughts where I say to myself, I've messed up too much. God can't use me anymore. I tell myself before anybody else tells me, you're going to fail at this. It's too late. You're not good enough. And the messages that come in unfiltered, they slowly become the messages I tell myself, especially when the work is exhausting and I'm already anxious, I'm already angry, I'm already ready to quit. And that's why Nehemiah teaches us to quickly pray, to not even dwell on those things. Refuse entry to the information that you know very well is false. Take it to God. We need to connect to him, to only his truth. If you don't have a firewall of prayer, what you're going to do is you're going to absorb things that were never meant to be in your system in the first place. So let's see what Nehemiah did when the messages came in. There are 4 prayers that I wanted to look at, but I know we won't have time, but to really just look at one in depth. And so what this prayer in Nehemiah 4, 1 through 3 will tell us is this: when attacks strike, fire back. When attacks strike, fire back. That's the time to take it to God in prayer. So Nehemiah 4, 1 through 3 says this: Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall. He flew into a rage and he mocked the Jews, saying in front of his friends and the Samaritan army officers, "What's this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? Do they think they can build the wall in a single day by just offering a few sacrifices? Do they actually think that they can make something of stones from a rubbish heap and charred ones at that?" Tobiah the Ammonite, who was standing beside him, remarked, "That stone wall would collapse if even a fox walked out on top of it." Burned, huh? Ooh. You see what they're doing? They are introducing information that is not in congruence with God's word. God said, "I'm sending you. We're going to build this wall. I'm making this happen. I'm fighting this fight." And they didn't have the authority, really, to stop the work, or else they would have done it. See, they weren't really in charge. Nehemiah already had the proper authority from the king that reigned that area. So he's walking with the instructions and the authority of the king. The enemy can't stop him from doing what the king says he can do, except one way he can: discouragement. Introducing doubt and discouragement. And so how do you do that? You begin trash talking. They do that all the time in sports. You probably enjoy it most of the time in sports. It's a strategy. You can't bend the rules and just like if it's basketball, grab the guy and say, you can't get to the basket now. No, what do? You trash talk to him. It's a brick. You say anything to shake the guy's confidence, and that a lot of times works, doesn't it? It shakes the confidence, even though the person has the skill, the person has the authority. They're playing by the right rules. It's a strategy just to get in your head. Ridicule is one of the enemy's favorite fire starters. And here's the thing: Nehemiah is shaken a bit. You're going to see in his prayer, he's shaken a bit. But he takes that shakenness straight to God. He doesn't go back and forth, because I do that all the time. If I'm not feeling right, I'm feeling a little vulnerable, somebody's bowing up at me, I bow up at them, and then I regret it. I'm not being my best me. You don't just keep playing back and forth with the enemy, but you take it straight to God and you pray. And Nehemiah prays. He prays a bold prayer. He prays an uncomfortable prayer. He prays a jarring prayer. Listen to this. Nehemiah 4, 4 through 5. It says, "Then I prayed, hear us, our God, for we are being mocked. May their scoffing fall back on their own heads, and may they themselves become captives in a foreign land. Do not ignore their guilt. Do not blot out their sins, for they have provoked you to anger here in front of the builders." Now let's admit, we haven't really been taught to pray that way. We're supposed to be nice. We're Southerns, aren't we? Some of us are. We're polite. Now we just want you to wish you a merry day, and God bless you as well, right? This is not a graceful prayer that we saw in chapter 1, where it nicely falls into these well thought out categories. This is someone who is hurt. This is someone who feels not just an offense, but knows this is an offense to God, and he's not going to settle for it. This is a biblical prayer, church. Because it is messy doesn't mean that it is wrong. Our prayer life, if we're honest, is very messy. Because that's the human condition. In fact, what we see, and I won't get into it all, but these 4 prayers throughout chapters 4 through 6, they show that Nehemiah is widely swinging in his emotions. And he goes from pointing fingers in one moment to then pointing the finger at him in self-reflection. Nehemiah 4 through 5, we've seen that one. He's basically saying, God, you see what they're doing? But if you go to chapter 5, it's a different situation going on at that moment. And there's more, not the same enemies, it's more of his own people now and a question of corruption. And he's saying, Lord, don't forget about me. He's not just saying, look at them. He's saying, Lord, look at me, because I'm sacrificing here. And then in Nehemiah 6:9, the enemies come back, and not only are they just trash talking, but they are really about to kill him. They're moved on into real intimidation, real threats, and he says to God, now strengthen my hands, because the work's not done, and these threats are real. So he goes to them, to self-reflection, to again saying, I'm not able unless you provide. And then he goes to Nehemiah 6:14, where there's absolute outright manipulation, where they are trying to set him up and make it look like he doesn't have integrity. And he says, remember them. Don't just remember me. Remember them and everything that they're doing. Fighting the enemy is exhausting, and it will cause your emotions to swing widely in anger and exhaustion and finger pointing and self-reflection. Does that look like your prayer life? The point is that prayer helps you when attacks come from all sides. No matter what is going on, no matter the attack, prayer is the answer for the attacks from every side. Our enemy is good at finding our weaknesses. He knows where the cracks are in your armor. He knows what's going on in your personal life. He knows what's going on at home. He knows what's going on at work. And he uses all those things to hurt you. Why does he want to hurt you so badly? Because God loves you so very much. And you are his glory. And Satan hates that. And he wants to hurt God so badly that he will take you out. And he wants you to fail. And he wants you to be weak and pathetic. And Jesus told us that how all the attacks come from all sides. He said to us in John 10:10, he says, the thief comes only to steal, to kill, and destroy. One day it's one thing, the next day it's another thing. Genesis 3:1 reminds us exactly how subtle Satan is. Satan doesn't always use brute force attacks. It's very subtle. It's very cunning. I mean, you ever get those things? Well, lately I've been getting a lot on my phone, these texts that says that I owe some money to the DMV. Ha ha ha, good try. It just shows us Satan is cunning. He's better than that, you know? He's better than the whole Prince of Nigeria scam. It may work on some people some of the time, but he knows your weaknesses. And Genesis 3:1 reminds us that the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field. Satan proves this point in the desert temptations as well. Remember, when Jesus is in the desert, he's already physically weak with hunger. Satan doesn't just attack with force. He comes in and he blends half-truths and twisted scriptures. And he says, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. Why not? You can do that, right? You're hungry, right? Why was he doing that? Satan was planting a message in his mind and in his spirit. He's saying this to him. If God really loved you, he wouldn't leave you hungry. Maybe you hear something like that in your life. If God really loved you, you wouldn't have encountered this sickness. You wouldn't have encountered this disease. You wouldn't have encountered this in your family. Sanballat was doing the same thing by planting doubt. He actually says to them, do you actually think that you can make something out of this rubbish heap? These charred up, broken stones? He's saying if God really called you to build this wall, he would have given you some quality supplies. This isn't going to work with what God provided. And maybe that's what you're hearing in your own head. That maybe there's an answer to my problems, but what I've got and what God has provided to me is not going to work. It will always fail. Then Tobiah, he comes out and he thinks he's a jokester, right? He says even a fox would knock it over. And Satan uses a similar mocking tone in Matthew 4:6, where it says, if you're the Son of God, jump off at this high peak that they were at. For the scriptures say, he will order his angels to protect you, and they will hold you up with their hands so that you won't even hurt your foot on a stone. In other words, he's saying this, if you're really God's son, the angels aren't even supposed to let you stub a toe. And here you are, fragile, pathetic. Satan's war is subtle. He doesn't want believers to understand how powerful God truly is. He doesn't want his people to understand how much God cares. If we understood how powerful God really is, we would be walking in confidence as if we have the king's papers in our hands and you'd shoo the man away as a fly. Because it doesn't matter what you think, what you say. I'm walking in the will of God. And he tells me that it will be right when I follow his obeying and when I follow his commands. If we really understood how much God cares, we would walk in peace and not be so upset and in fear day by day by day. Walk in confidence. Walk in peace. And the only way you're going to do that is if you will take those attacking views straight to God and let him tell you what your identity in him is. See, Satan's tactic is to distort your view of God's power, to discourage you in your faith. What his attempts are is to diminish in your mind what it means to be a child of God, what it means to be called by his name, what it means to be fully loved by him, and to be engaged completely in a mission that Christ himself has placed on your life. This is where prayer becomes your firewall. This is where you realign what it is that you're hearing and even what you tell yourself with what God says. And you begin to say, my God is able. My God is good. My God is not distant. My God is not weak. He is not late. And he is not going to put up with evil forever. Now you know Jesus tells us to pray for our enemies. It's true. But he does not say, stop crying out for justice. God's justice and mercy are both biblically true. And you don't always have to pray every single time the one way. There are imprecatory prayers, which means that you are asking God to bring justice to the situation. Now, you're not out there trying to fight for yourself against flesh and blood, but you're saying, God, you fight for what is right and what is just. And then there's intercessory prayers where then I might say, God, show mercy on these, even my enemies. But listen, the Psalms are full of both of those kinds of prayers. And you don't have to pray just the one. And you don't always have to pray both of them. Your prayers are going to be messy. The point is, take them to God. Whatever it is that is on your heart, you take it to God. And if right now you see evil before you, you cast it out, Jesus says. You believe in faith that if it's against what God has already said, what you know to be God's truth, then it is wrong. We are in a bad state of life these days because people won't say, that's sin. No. You can't go that direction and still be right with God. If you put your foot down early on, you say that's false information, and you refuse it, you're going to save yourself trouble in the long run. But the Psalms, they tell us in both ways. In fact, David said a whole lot worse about his enemies. Maybe find some of those prayers and pray them. You might not feel okay about it. The Psalms are full of both the imprecatory prayers and the intercessory prayers. And listen, so is Jesus on the cross. Because Jesus says, your will be done. He also said before he got there, I don't want to do this. This is wrong. This feels bad. Evil is going to win, and I don't want to do this. But then he also said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Jesus is both the one who teaches us to love enemies, but he is also that righteous judge at the end of all time where he will defeat forever all evil, and he'll do it without blinking. He says evil is wrong, Satan is defeated, and yet he also loves his enemies. So, what do? Well, you pray like Nehemiah, you love like Jesus. Maybe that's what's going to happen this week, is that you just got to get your face before God. You got to land on your knees and say, I don't like this. I'm angry about it. I'm being mocked. God, this isn't right. But you don't trust your own feelings on that. You see how messy we are? Are we fighting for ourselves? No, you take it to God, and he will tell you whether or not you are right in this. He will tell you whether or not he's going to change the hearts of those who are against you or not. That's why your prayers matter so much. When the enemy attacks, don't take the bait. Don't take the bait. Take it to God. Your prayers don't have to sound pretty today. You just have to refuse entry to the falsities from the father of lies. You bring it immediately to God and allow him to help you and say, this isn't who I am. This isn't who God is. Those things aren't true, and I'm not letting lies shake my faith. To be honest, most of us have messages that we've been carrying inside of us that never should have gotten through a firewall. Somewhere in our past, maybe not even too distant past, you've been mocked, you've been diminished, and now you're doubting your faith, and you're doubting whether or not God is really in control. Somewhere down the line, someone's planted a lie in you saying, it has to be better than this if God is real. But instead of blocking it right out, you believed it. Now you're just repeating it. And you're saying to yourself, I'm not enough. God's not enough. The enemy's always going to win. Why even try? God doesn't even care. It's not from the Spirit of God. That is not from the Spirit of God. It's false information, and you need to refuse entry into your soul. If prayer is a firewall, then today it's time to rebuild yours. I want you to take your burdens and your battles to God. I want you to have your spirit realigned with God. And you say to God, God, I hear them. I hear the voices. But I will listen to you instead. You are my shield. You are my defender. You are my guide. You're not weak. You are on time. And this is the way you fortify your faith, by remembering today who God truly is. To stand where Nehemiah stood on the edge of your mission, surrounded by opposition, and you pray your bold, messy, honest prayer. And you say, God, you see this? You see this mess? You see what they're doing? Do you see me? Do you care? And he will say, I do. I've known about it before you have even seen it. And he's not just powerful, and he's not just able to make things happen, but he is good. And he is merciful. So he knows how to handle it wherever there is unrighteousness, whether it be in them or you. So when you pray with the fire of Nehemiah and the heart of Jesus, you won't just survive the attack. You'll silence it.